me formally welcome, our Joint Secretary for the Latin America and the Caribbean Division, Ambassador Gloria Gangte. It's a great pleasure to have you with the Peninsula Foundation today. We are a young think tank set up in Chennai, and we work towards enhancing the capacities in the region, particularly for the younger generation, in terms of understanding various aspects of policy making, policy understanding, as well as issues of governance, international relations, geopolitics, security, and of course, the innovation and transformation paradigms, which is one of our important verticals. It's indeed a great pleasure to, have you explain the aspects of India's approach to, South America and the Caribbean region. I think for a long time, we've had, we have a famous saying which says, out of sight is out of mind. And I think probably that kind of an approach animated India's strategy for a long time, but we've now changed that, as you will probably explain. The Latin America's, obviously, all except for Brazil, everybody has a Spanish origin and the Portuguese origin in Brazil. Both Spanish and Portuguese cultures, I found in my visits a couple of times, which I've seen both in Argentina, Brazil, and in Ecuador, I think they are quite, vibrant as much as Indian culture is, and they are quite animated. And therefore, there is a fair amount of, affinity that naturally develops when you actually meet them across on the, one-to-one and social side. But notwithstanding that, I think this continent and that region has a huge potential in terms of trade and in terms of economics, in terms of, technology interface and interaction. And we've just launched the Amazonian one day before in our PSLV 51. And I think the potential for collaboration is huge. I think it's underutilized, and probably a lot of, our audiences, there's lots of them on the Facebook, particularly in our Peninsula Foundation group. But we are also getting a lot of people who will join from the industry associations from Chennai, and they'll be there directly into the, both watching on the Facebook Live as well as on the site. And we look forward to hearing that from you. Let me hand over to Sunod, and he will take on the, session from now on. Sunod, all yours.
Thank you, Marshal. First, let me introduce the lecture series that we have. We introduced the Eminent Persons e-lecture series since the first lockdown last year. And ever since, we've been consistently hosting such lectures through the Zoom platform, almost on a monthly basis. So we invite eminent persons with expertise in niche areas to address on specific thematics. And for this month, we have the privilege of hosting Mrs. Gloria Gangte, who is the Joint Secretary for the Latin American and Caribbean Division at the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi. So moving on, let me introduce our eminent speaker for today, Mrs. Gloria Gangte. As I had mentioned earlier, she's Joint Secretary for the Latin America and Caribbean Division at the Ministry of External Affairs. Prior to her current position, Mrs. Gangte served as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Indian Embassy in Rome and Deputy Permanent Representative of India at the Food and Agricultural Organization and other Rome-based international agencies in Italy. And she also served at the Embassy of India in Muscat at Oman during the years 2015 and 16. Prior to that, she served as Consular Political at the Permanent Mission of India to the United Nations in Geneva and was the key Indian delegate to the UN Human Rights Council. A career diplomat, Mrs. Gangte's overseas assignments have included political, commercial, cultural, and information work at the Indian Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She has also worked as head of Chancery and has handled consular work at the Embassy of India in Madrid in Spain. At the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, Mrs. Gloria Gangte has served as Deputy Secretary earlier in the same division, that is the Latin America and Caribbean division, which deals with more than 33 countries, and as attaché in the East Asia division dealing with China and Japan. So with these words of introduction, let me invite our guest for today evening, Mrs. Gloria Gangte. Over to you, Gloria. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, respected Air Marshal M. Matheswaran, AVSM, VM, PhD, and President, the Peninsula Foundation. Mr. Sunod Jacob, Senior Fellow of the Peninsula Foundation. I'm really grateful to the Foundation for having invited me this evening to speak on a topic which is, extremely close to my heart. In fact, as you see, I started my career immersed, I should say, into the region that I'm going to speak about. And as Air Marshal had in his introductory remarks said that, there's so many similarities, the colors and the culture. I think it was absolutely right. And I'm really very, very excited to introduce this region to a very distinguished group of people as yourselves. And I was, in fact, very impressed about, the kind of questions. Sunod, you mentioned that this was put in by your research team. And I was definitely very happy that, the questions will be bringing out very substantive aspects of our relationship with Latin America. So my presentation is, based on the questions, keeping in mind the questions that you've already set forth, and also, some aspects of Latin America and the Caribbean region that I would like to highlight. So I wanted to show a map, but I think it's a bit complicated since you're recording this to go back and forth with the presentation. So I'll just let the audience imagine, the Latin America and the Caribbean map, which perhaps they could Google and look at. And as we see, it is about 33 sovereign countries. There are a number of overseas territories. There are about 10 or 12 of them, which are there, but they belong to other countries. And therefore, we deal with these overseas territories also, but mostly in consular terms, and sometimes for the concurrent accreditation of that ambassador who is sitting in Latin America. So now we have in Latin American region, so these 33 countries, have 14, we have 14 Indian embassies in these countries. And I'm very happy to announce that, our focus on LAC region is beginning to gain momentum, and the cabinet very recently approved the opening of 2 new embassies in the region. These are Paraguay in South America and one in the Caribbean, which is Dominican Republic. And we have 21 Latin American embassies in India. And the last one to open its embassy was the Embassy of Jamaica. So one from the Caribbean, So this also tells you a bit about how we are focusing on another really sort of new region, to put it in the words of our Air Marshal, the president of the foundation. He did say that this is something, this region was, really in the background, but we're now trying to bring it in the foreground. So I would say that it's really a big push that we're getting, particularly for the countries in the CARICOM region, and this CARICOM region Caribbean region has an organization called the CARICOM, which is a regional organization of 15 countries. But I deal with 14 of them because one of them actually is in overseas territories. And so, we treat it a little bit separately. So these 14 CARICOM countries are gaining, a lot of salience in terms of our engagement with overall the region of LAC. And so this region has a population of just about 650 million. And you can imagine, the area is extremely huge. The density of population is very, compared to India, it's absolutely nothing, frankly. And so they do have a large spread of land, agriculture, fertile land, which is available. And this also tells you that they are also resource rich. And so, there are the pressure on land for people to live on is not as much as we have in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia. And so these are resource rich countries. There's oil, gas, lithium, gold, copper, tin, you name it, and there's quite a lot of them. And then on top of that, these are agriculture powerhouses. For example, the South American countries of Brazil and Argentina are extremely large powerhouses. And I will, towards the end of my, as we go along, I'll also give you how we see the LAC region for India and our approach to these countries. But I just thought I'll just give you a snapshot of how this region is. In terms of GDP, it's about 10 trillion economy, and in PPP terms, and in nominal terms, it's about 5 trillion. And if you compare that with India, of course, we are 3 trillion. And so then in terms of GDP per capita, if you look at India's, it's about 2,200 or so. And the LAC region on an average, this is not a real reflection, but just for an idea, it's about $9,900 per capita. So it's a really huge per capita there. And so you can look at, the market in the LAC region, also not just in terms of its population, but in terms of how the purchasing power that they have. So I want to also tell you that they have 3 main languages: Spanish and Portuguese, and we've forgotten about the English. The Caribbean is full of, English-speaking countries. We are also co-members with them in the Commonwealth. And so there's another real good platform for us to engage with these countries a lot more. So that's the LAC region in a snapshot. So what have we been doing? Politically, there is a great interest among the leadership to really push this forward. And this was basically shown by the fact that, in the last few years, last 5 years, I can say that there has been a thrust of visits from India to Latin America. And so President of India, President Kovind, has visited 4 of these countries: Suriname, Cuba, Chile, and Bolivia. And Vice President has visited Guatemala, Panama, Peru, Paraguay, and Costa Rica. Whereas Prime Minister visited Brazil in 2014. In fact, that was his first ever visit abroad as Prime Minister. So he had visited for the BRICS summit, but also had a bilateral meeting during that time. And so he visited again last year for the BRICS summit when Brazil hosted it. And then you had his visit to Mexico and Argentina, both for G20, in Argentina. And so these were really, good signals. I think, very, very clear signal that India is engaging with the SLAC region, and that this region is indeed an important one. Unfortunately, in 2020, we had planned for a number of visits from India, but these could not come to fruition, and because of the COVID, and hopefully we will be able to pick up again after travel restrictions are lifted. But from their side, I can tell you that there is big interest. In 2019, if you see, Argentine president had come, and in 2020, the president of Brazil was the chief guest for our Republic Day function. And so all these really tell you that Latin America and Indian relationship are really, at new heights in recent times. And now, what does that really mean in terms of, let's say numbers in the sense of real trade, real engagements, at the people-to-people level, etc. So trade at the moment, India-LAC trade at the moment in 2019-20 was about $35 billion, as compared to $30 billion in 2015-16. The average trade during last 5 years is US $34.63 billion, with an average import of 22.48 billion and an average export of 12.15 billion. So in the last 5 years, India-Latin America trade peaked at US $39.7. That's almost 40 billion in 2018-19. Unfortunately, trade has definitely been hit, but in a small way, I would say, because of the COVID situation. But I'm sure, this is also another opportunity that we can definitely encash on. And that's when I will respond to the vaccine diplomacy question that you've asked. I think I'll get there. So India-LAC trade in terms of percentage, in terms of India's total trade for 2019-20 was 4.45%. And if you compare this to 2015-16 figures, it was 4.72. So not much in terms of, the overall trade has really grown with Latin America until now. So we need to really step up, and there are opportunities. Definitely, there is potential, and we know how to do it. So all we have to do is to really work on it and get our act together. And I'm sure that, India-LAC trade will definitely increase. The COVID has certainly opened up, opportunities in terms of the breakage of the supply chains, etc. And all these Latin American countries looking for cheaper, better quality and assured supply of goods. And so when we, in fact, but I'll tell you, this story is not just, sticking to just improving trade per se. Although in the overall trade of India, LAC is just about 4.7%. I can tell you that LAC is more important for India's exports to some neighbors and traditional trade partners that we have. This trend had begun in 2010, and despite longer shipping time and heavier freight, bigger freight costs, Indian goods became really competitive in Latin America and the Caribbean region. And so about like in Mexico, for example, it's the second largest destination for India's vehicle exports. and of about almost 2 billion. And Indian brands like Tata, Bajaj Auto, Hero, Mahindra are extremely popular in the LAC region. And if we look at some of the trade figures that we have with the, let's say, neighboring, Cambodia, for example. Cambodia is just about 3,400 kilometers. And what is the trade with Guatemala, which is about 15,000 kilometers? If we look at it, it's about more than $300 million. And Cambodia, it's just about $196 million in. So you can really say that there are other examples also, but I just thought I'd highlight this because it really tells you that distance is not the issue here. The main thing is basically that our traders, exporters, our investors, they get to know each other and have this contact, maintain this contact, and and that is why we have worked on a number of frameworks which will facilitate this contact. And those are, we've had the Mercosur India PTA, and in fact, India was one of the first countries to have a preferential trade agreement with this grouping called Mercosur. Mercosur is a trade bloc of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And now we're looking at the expansion of the PTA, and we're hoping that we will be able to do so. There are definitely certain internal challenges that Mercosur has, which ultimately we hope that they will overcome, and we will be able to move forward on this. Then we also have the India-Chile preferential trade agreement. This came into effect in 2017, and now we are looking at how we can expand this and most probably move even forward to FTA. And so with Colombia and Ecuador too, we're looking at a joint study for trade agreements right now. And if we take Colombia and the other countries like Chile, the Pacific, on the Pacific coast, that is Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico. They form what is called the Pacific Alliance. And this is one such grouping, which is one of the most successful groupings in a very, very short time. This Pacific Alliance has really been able to achieve a lot. And so it's a very good example of Latin American integration at a very fast pace. Now, India is an observer in the Pacific Alliance, and we're looking at the feasibility of a trade agreement with the Pacific Alliance. We are also looking at how best we can, utilize this platform and engage with these countries of the Pacific Alliance. Now, there are, apart from trade, we are in engagement with Latin American countries through development programs and projects, and some are in the form of lines of credit, and some are in the form of grant in aid. And when we give lines of credit, it also reflects and permits the showcasing of India's strength, because these come with 75% Indian content requirement. And so it really gives them a chance to showcase the Indian prowess in terms of construction, for example, or technology, or any other products that this a particular project might require. And for grant 2, that is also the aim in terms of, this cooperation, so that we are able to understand how things work through these projects also. And most of these grants and aid are basically as per the requirements of those countries. Those countries request us, and so today, for example, the grant and aid to 8 projects in Latin America is more than more than 70 crores. 70 crores is what we have now. But there are also a lot of challenges for Indian trade and investment in Latin America. Sorry, I forgot to touch upon investments in Latin America. Indian investments in Latin America is, almost about 20 billion investment, and more than 134 Indian companies and 216 subsidiaries are operating in LAC. And this number is growing. So this may not be the latest number, but until recently. So Indian companies operating in LAC also give employment to many of these. So the model that our companies are following is extremely appreciated by the leadership in Latin America and also the people, because they employ, and they prefer, in fact, to employ. And so this is one way of also capacity building and collaborating with these countries. So it's a very good way of collaboration, because instead of sending Indian employees, they use local talent. So the Indian companies are looked at and welcomed in this region. And in fact, many of them keep asking, whether their people can get trained in India or in certain areas. So the other the challenges for India's trade and investment in Latin America is that many of these markets are largely protective, and naturally so, because they themselves want their companies to grow. And so competition from FTA partners is also extremely let's say heavy, because many of these Latin American countries have free trade agreement with many countries. Like, for example, Dominican Republic, a small island country in the Caribbean, has even free trade agreements with US, and Mexico also have, and Chile, for example, has more than, I think, 40 or so free trade agreements. And therefore, there are also intra-regional free trade agreements within LAC itself. So these are definitely challenges to some of our companies who would like to do business in Latin America. And trade, of course, there are non-tariff barriers everywhere, and these are also something that we need to continuously work out. Inefficiencies along transport routes, logistics issues, indirect shipping routes, So there are a number of these issues there. And also the fact that language sometimes can be a barrier, and also information, lack of information there. So I think the challenges are there, but they are not insurmountable. We are working with industry to look at how best we can work around these issues, and also with these countries themselves. So, for example, if we look at the challenges that we have in terms of visas, for example, these are some of the areas where directly MEA is involved. And so we are really trying to see how best we can take off those non-tariff barriers such as visa, etc. Then with these Latin American countries, we also engage with them through a program called ITEC. And ITEC is, the technical program that where we not only bring students who want to come and study in some of our and take courses in different areas, but we also send experts to these Latin American countries. For example, Guyana, for example, has said, send us a sugar expert. And we are, looking at how best we can help them in reviving their sugar industry. And so there are various ways under which we utilize, let's say, the ITEC slots that are there. And these have been utilized very well by the countries. And so this brings us a lot of goodwill in the region, and also a lot of understanding of India by those people who come and take part in the courses. So those are then. So apart from ITEC and different projects that we do, we also have cross-cultural interaction. There's a long standing historic and cultural interaction between India and Latin America, and not just the historical, but there is also a very strong and continuing interest in India's culture, philosophy, religion, and spirituality, music, dance, and arts. And a lot of festivals of India, for example, are celebrated, especially in the Caribbean region. And Bollywood, of course, is one other area which really connects people immediately. And so there is a lot of interest, not only on these, but also the new fad or the new interest is yoga and Ayurveda. And very recently, we established a Panchkarma Center in Cuba. And, and in fact, Cuba is the one country which has actually recognized Ayurveda as a official form of treatment. Really, they have recognized that in their health system. And so that is something that we want to do with all of the Latin American countries, and see how best we can promote Indian Ayurveda and yoga as well in the region. And spirituality is, of course, another area where there are a lot of devotees of Satya Sai Baba and Hare Krishna, etc., in Argentina, Brazil, and in many parts of Latin America. So this brings me to another very important connection that we have with Latin America, which is the Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora is more than about 1 million or so, much more than 1 million. And most of these are concentrated in the Caribbean countries. And you would have heard about these Girmitia countries where Indian laborers, were brought to these countries to work as laborers during the colonial days. And these are Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Guyana, and Suriname. So 4 of the Girmitia countries are in the Latin American and the Caribbean region. And we have a very strong connect. There is, in fact, at the Pravasi Bharati Divas this year, the president of Suriname, who is a person of Indian origin, president, he was a chief guest. And so this connection has been reinforced definitely by, keeping, let's say, these contacts through the Pravasi Bharatiya or Divas events and many other events that we do through our Overseas Indian Association Overseas Indian, Association division. Yeah, and this in the Ministry of External Affairs. So we are also, these people are really eager to discover their Indian roots and strive to keep up their cultural heritage alive, and they are well integrated, of course, into their society, but at the same time, they really are extremely important living bridge connecting India to the region. And that is also one of the reasons why in 2019, there was a very special summit which was attended by our Prime Minister along with the Caribbean region. And so that was one of the first time when 14 leaders of the Caribbean, that is the CARICOM, met PM. So I'll
Thank you, Gloria ji. I know it is quite onerous to ask you to speak for just 30 minutes and cover 33 countries. So we'll cover as much as possible through the Q&A session. Yeah, a small remark. When we started looking at this region, it was largely due to the support of Ambassador Mubarak, who encouraged us to look at this region more seriously, because think tanks have a bit blindsided on this region.
Yes.
So we are young and we are eager to learn, and that's perhaps what is reflected in the Q&A questions that have been shared with you, because our researchers have been working on this area since recent times. Secondly, your experience in this region, working from headquarters earlier, and also your experience as a multilateralist was also showing in your assessment of this region with all the groupings, very intriguing set of groupings. So it'll be a learning curve for us and our researchers in the days to come. Thank you. So with that, I'll move on to the questions. So the first question is pertaining to our vaccine diplomacy. Could you brief us about the COVID-19 vaccine distribution to this region from India? And a sub context question to this: was it requested? If yes, by which countries? Has it been provided at a subsidized cost? Is it how is the expanded distribution expected? These are the sub questions to this broad question. Thank you.
It's a very important question, but I want to bring you back before the vaccine. During the days of the COVID-19, when it all began, you would have seen news reports about how India was, projecting itself as the pharmacy of the world, because it was sending hydroxychloroquine and other essential medicines to treat COVID-19. And so we did this even with the Latin American and the Caribbean region. And we sent about medical packages worth, more than 17 crores to the Latin American region and to 27 countries. And in fact, one of them was done during the lockdown era. I mean, the really heavy lockdown period, and we surmounted, various challenges. So that was one real fulfilling, I think, event where we were able to, despite all the challenges, logistical and whatnot, we're able to get essential medicine on time to our partners in Latin America. So this is something that we believe, that India is capable of doing. And whenever our friends reach out to us, we should be able to respond. Obviously, we need to also take into account our own domestic requirements and the production capacities. And this is what is happening with vaccines as well. And so with the vaccines too, we began with an announcement for the CARICOM countries. And, the CARICOM has been really badly hit because most of them are their economies are based on tourism, and that is the first one to be hit. And so they really required help, and also they reached out to Prime Minister also, and we announced that, and we have now been able to deliver to most of them. Just a few countries are left. Logistic challenges remain, but however, we are working around those. And but definitely there are more requests, there are additional requests that we have received. So far we have provided about 9.4 lakhs of doses of vaccines to this region, of Latin America. That is only donation, but we have also provided about 2 million in the form of commercial, commercial dispatches to Brazil, and also about 8.7 lakhs to Mexico, and also some amount to Argentina has also gone. And in the days to come, we are also looking at how best we can facilitate some of these commercial, contracts which have already been entered into. And now, as we see, a lot of Latin American countries are also becoming very positive towards the Indian, because it was not known, now that you have demonstrated your capacity, your capability, especially in times of need. Most of them are really very open to looking at sourcing for their population essential medicines, and medicines that are approved by FDA, for example, because earlier they were not even letting these FDA approved drugs also, because so many are now very positive to look at how best they can bring down their health costs. And so pharmaceuticals is one place that which has really gained momentum in India-LAC relations, and we're really hoping that this will continue.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. The next question is a slightly follow-up to the question on the impact of the pandemic. Could you share your impressions on the impact of the pandemic on Indian exports, but not limited to pharmaceuticals, to the Latin American and Caribbean region? Thank you.
Sure. See, Indian exports definitely are something that that will be looked at because of the supply chain breakage. And once you've also proven that you are definitely able to supply to these countries in time, and despite challenges, they are going to look at it. But definitely there are challenges in terms of payments, for example, whether these countries will be, some of the countries may not be able to pay because of their obligations that they've undertaken and COVID spending that they've done, and their economies having been hit. So there are all this that might impact on the exports, let's say Indian exports. But I think the overall positivity that is created, they will definitely bring in focus to India in these countries, and that will definitely give a momentum to the attention that many of these countries have never put in, and bring in that attention. And once they do that, I'm sure they'll find exporters who are definitely able to cater to them. And Indian prices are competitive. So Indian, and I'm sure, we will be. And in fact, we are also now trying to look at how best we can facilitate, let's say, agricultural products and fruits and vegetables, because of the fact that, the seasons are different. Let's say when it's summer here, in India, it is, in South America, for example, it's winter. And so that it's not a threat at all in terms of, it's a complementarity that we're looking at here. So in that sense, I think, diversification, they also want to diversify from China. And, India too wants to diversify in terms of its own, selling its products, for example. So many who have not been looking at Latin America as a market, for example, I think many Indian companies will also start looking at, because of what we have learned from this whole COVID scenario.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, could you apprise us of the recent measures, assuming 2015 as the point of reference, from 2014 onwards, on the measures taken to enhance cooperation, technical cooperation in the field of renewable energy, information and communication technology, higher education, and agricultural technology? Thank you.
That's I think that's one lecture actually by itself. But I can tell you, definitely renewable energy definitely is something that is really gaining focus. And recently, Government of India had undertaken this initiative called the ISA, International Solar Alliance, along with France. And so a number of these Latin American countries are part of that. And then they're also availing of the projects which are, available under, by virtue of them being members of this alliance. They're, they're able to get some grants from us in terms of the projects that they want to have. So this is one real good measure that we have, and this partnership will continue to grow. And many of these Latin American countries are also in the process of ratifying, some of them have not yet ratified, but they're also accelerating that ratification process wherever possible. And so there is this emphasis on, collaboration. And the other measure is on, if you saw the, during the visit of President Bolsonaro to India, with Brazil, we signed 15 agreements. One of those agreements was an agreement on biofuels. And, Brazil is a powerhouse for that kind of fuel, and they have real good technology on in that score. And so we do have also some of the countries in the Caribbean with whom we are trying to see how best we can encourage projects on wind energy and solar energy as well. So there is definitely a trust on that side. And you mentioned agri-technology. I think that is also another area where, there's great strength in Latin America. And also we have working groups, for example, that look into how we can exchange best practices on agri-technology or agriculture practices more broadly. And so there is definitely frameworks. There are frameworks where, which facilitate collaboration in all the fields that you mentioned, including even information and communication technologies. I think this COVID, of course, again, I come back to that. IT is becoming one of those areas where LAC countries will want to have some cooperation with India, particularly for having, let's say, digitization and things like that much more quickly. So these are, I think, there are definitely contacts that we have and frameworks too. So in this very short time, it's not possible for me to go into those frameworks, but we have a number of, let's say, working groups, that look into these areas.
Thank you. It actually helps us, we having a small team of researchers who look at this area. That helps us in prioritizing those sectors into which we need to look at. And I can understand that renewable energy would be among the top in that order. Thank you. The next is pertaining to the ITech program, which you had briefly mentioned. Do you think it is one of our flagship capacity building programs. Do you think there is a room for improvement vis-a-vis the Latin American and Caribbean region?
See, I don't know what you really mean by improvement, but I think there is a room for increasing the slots because, Latin American and the Caribbean region really is looking at India for capacity building in many areas. As I mentioned, sugar, for example, is one. The other is, also now we're looking at countries that are requesting for legal experts, for example. Mm-hmm. So there are different areas where, we can really collaborate with them and in their capacity building efforts. Also, our Foreign Service Institute, for example, is another one which really helps them in training, in protocol, for example, and where we have great strengths. So yeah, definitely there is absolutely a big room there.
Thank you. The next question is pertaining to the shipbuilding industry. Given the geographical conditions, maritime trade is important to both India and the LAC region. How do you see the scope of cooperation between India and this region in terms of the shipbuilding sector? Thank you.
Huge. In just one word, I can tell you huge. And if you want another, it's and very, very positive. I'll just give you one example of that is, recently Larsen and Toubro, for example, sent this big ship, military ship to Chile. It was worth about, I think, more than $11 million. And this is just the beginning, of what can happen. And so I think the scope for shipbuilding, helping them, in building ports, for example, I think there's really big scope because these are all, if you look at the whole of Pacific coast of that side and the Atlantic, they have both, and they are, historically, maritime experts, and they were also discovered through the sea. So frankly, I think shipping is definitely one area which we can develop and really look at it because the potential there is extremely huge. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is pertaining to non-traditional security threats. Drug trafficking in the South Asian region poses a threat to the region. What is the scope of cooperation between India and the Latin American and Caribbean countries in terms of intelligence and law enforcement domain to counter such challenges and threats? Thank you.
Sunod, you mentioned about my multilateral experience. I think here UNODC is there, and that's where actually we are really cooperating with them in terms of information exchange and with the Latin American countries. At the same time, they also have this unique experience of, dealing with this immense issue. And with that, I think there is definitely contact, but such contacts are not necessarily bilateral. So we do have a certain exchanges in terms of strategic, let's say, dialogue, for example, with Brazil and with some of our strategic partners. So in the Latin American region, we have two strategic partners. One is Brazil and the other is Argentina. And Mexico is a privileged partnership. And so we do have, certain exchanges, but at the same time, this does not mean that we do not exchange, intelligence with other countries of the region. We do it on a need basis, and we are also looking at certain frameworks like, mutual assistance in criminal matters, mutual assistance in civil matters. And also extradition, so that it all helps in all this cooperation that we are looking at.
Thank you. So the next question is on space cooperation. India has established itself as a credible space power. Do you see a scope for space cooperation between India and the Latin American and Caribbean countries? Thank you.
I think the president of the foundation mentioned in the beginning that, Amazonia was launched. And I think that's a very symbolic one, where we have launched an indigenously built satellite of Brazil. And this cooperation is actually, not just in this, but we are also helping them in capacity building as well in terms of their space and satellite development and things like that. And definitely there is a very, very big scope out there. And these countries also are very interested in collaborating with India in their programs. You would have seen some, some news items where some of the countries are beginning to have their space agencies. Earlier, they never had, those. So they're really looking at, what we're looking at here is very diverse and multifaceted cooperation between India and Latin America, including from the ground, which is, agriculture, the food, and we look at them as, let's say, partners for India's long-term food security and also long-term energy security. And now again, they also look at us in terms of, good technology partnership. So I think space is one area which is very, very new, but there is a huge potential.
Thank you. The next one is a more specific question regarding the Embraer. Embraer, Brazil's biggest aircraft manufacturer, has been looking for joint venture collaborations in the last few years. Given the collapse of the Boeing Embraer deal last year and the not so good state of financial affairs of Embraer, how can India use this to our advantage, and what are the chances of India making a deal? Thank you.
Well, that's a very difficult question because there are a number of stakeholders, in this, and there are also various factors that one has to keep in mind. We ourselves are wanting to, disinvest in Air India, and because of our, the challenges that Air India is facing. So you can really imagine here that there are, various considerations that we'll have to make. And so definitely this can be looked at as an opportunity. But at the same time, I would say that since this doesn't belong to just one stakeholder, in terms of how well we are able to, let's say, use the opportunity provided by the fact that Embraer is on sale. So I think we need to reflect and see what would be the opportunity and how best will we be able to make it viable, financially. So that is, I think, a big challenge, and I don't have the answer, exact answer that you might be looking for.
Thank you.
Sunod, I just add one point on the Embraer issue. Ambassador, the Embraer also, much like the HAL, it was a public sector unit till about 1969. And the government brought in an investor, and it's become a success story after that in terms of a lot of capacities and technological capabilities. So when now it is up for sale, and the context in which India is now pushing for a huge leapfrogging development as the objective in our aerospace segment, wouldn't it be a good advice to Indian companies to examine and venture out into acquiring this company, at least a controlling stake? And thereby you will actually be acquiring a significant competence in terms of, for the private sector particularly.
I think that's the private sector obviously makes its own decision ultimately, but definitely I can say that, they can look at it, but there are also other ways of collaborating with Embraer if they wish to. And so I would say that, definitely look at it, but if it doesn't make sense to you, then it's obviously your decision. And without having all the information with me, it's very difficult to say that, okay, please get into this. So yes, I can say that, this is a very good time and moment in India-Brazil relations. And any framework or any, let's say, government facilitation is required, we are ready to provide. So, I can tell you that whatever decision they make, we are there to facilitate. We are there to, let's say, make it smooth for them.
Thank you. Thank you. So the last question from among the questions that was already shared, this is on sports. India and the Caribbean region share a high interest in cricket. Whereas in Latin America, soccer is the more popular sport. Whereas in India, we have a huge latent pool of talent in soccer, young population, but it is still in a transition stage, and which has been a stage of infancy for, let's say, about 50 years. Do you think there is something more that we can do to capitalize on the talent pool and existing infrastructure in the Latin American region for promoting sports, football in India? Thank you.
That's a really loaded question, I must say, in some way, because it has definitely been many years, and we all know that Latin America is full of football stars, and this is one area where we can certainly collaborate. Not just football, I think athletics also. And as I spoke about the Caribbean, there are so many of these runners, athletics who are, and cricketers too. But yes, certainly football is one area. Having come from the Northeast, I know how important a sport it is for people from that side. But at the same time, I think this move of bringing together the sports is a very difficult thing, because in many government does its own, like we do have memorandum of understanding on cooperation in sports, and the frameworks are there, but at the same time I think a lot of it is also privatized out there in Latin America. So we need to actually look at what model of cooperation can best benefit and encourage India. So that I think needs a bit more expert eyes to look at how best, what could be a good model, whether it is just, trainers coming from here, will that be motivating enough? I don't know. Or we send our prospective footballers for training there. Frankly, it's something that we need to discuss a bit more in terms of how best we can, and also I think identification of talent. That is also another area all by itself, where, how do you identify who is a budding footballer? Do you need the help of Latin America to do that? Or you identify your own? So there are all these kind of questions, but definitely, as you said, there is a scope in enhancing the kind of connection that we have in the field of sports. Hockey, for example, is one area where, I remember when I was in Argentina, Indian hockey teams would come and we would go and cheer them, and very recently too they went there. So there are these exchanges that are happening, but as you said, up to the level of that recognition that is that the country will get, I think we are still a long way off, but yes, we'll get there someday, I hope.
Thank you. We have one question that has been posted through the chat box. It's been raised by Huma Siddiqui, and I assume that's journalist Huma Siddiqui, who covers the Latin American region. I have a question. When will SICA grouping meet?
That's a very I trust Umar Siddiqui to come with that question. But definitely SICA, that is SICA, Sistema Integración de Centroamérica, that is SICA. And this is, grouping of Central American countries. And we have a level of meeting, which is like the foreign ministers meeting of SICA. So we are definitely, wanting to keep up the momentum of engagement, but at times what happens is certainly it becomes challenging to keep up with, let's say, the momentum in terms of, how do you say, having immediate meetings follow up to, so the last meeting between the foreign ministers was in 2015, and now is definitely, a good moment. And we are working on this to see how, whether we can have it maybe towards the end of this year or next year. Let's see. I mean, it's still work in progress.
Thank you. So with that, we come to the close of questions. Now we open up the floor for the impromptu questions. We can take at the most 2 questions because we are already 10 minutes beyond schedule. Thank you.
Sunod, let me just ask a couple of questions, and that will be considered as one so that I give a chance to somebody else as well. Obviously, Ambassador, the one question relates to the elephant in the room, that's China, and China's huge presence in Latin America. When I visited in December 2019 in Sao Paulo, I mean, the presence of Chinese in every segment of institutions particularly is quite huge. So how does that impact on our building our relations in terms of competition? That's one. And the second one is about, the issues with respect to a military defense relationship. The embrace we spoke about, but we have a huge potential. We've had relations earlier in terms of exploiting technical strengths from both sides between Argentina, India, Brazil, and India, and I think it is still underexploited. So I think probably there's a huge area there where we can actually address that as well. Any inputs on that from your side?
Yeah, I fully agree with you on defense exports. I think not just exports but also the partnership that we can have. And we have defense attaché in Chile, and also another defense attaché who is based in Brazil.
Yes.
And they are looking, the one in Brazil is concurrently accredited to Peru and also to Argentina. And so we do have, also LAC countries have, their defense attaches here. Some 4 of these countries have their defense attaché, and there is recognition that there is a huge scope for this. But sometimes, the challenge is also in the regulatory framework. Like, for example, in Chile, there is all that potential, but until recently, there were not many companies, Indian companies, who registered, for tendering in those countries. And and that's how actually Larsen and Toubro, for example, recently only, I think, I'm not too sure, maybe just 2 years or 3 years ago, they had registered. And that's how they actually got the contract for Chile, that ship I was telling you about. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of that knowledge and information. And our embassies are there to help you, to people who really want and need information. They can help you and facilitate your registration process also. And so I think what is important here is that we disseminate information on the opportunities available, and also make sure that these opportunities are not missed by both countries. that we're looking at. So in terms of defense, already there are a number of Indian companies, which are already exporting, like, breastplates or small equipment and things like that. But we are getting to now a level where we're looking at, can we look at some co-production research, those areas as well. So there's a huge potential. On China, I would just say that, definitely China is everywhere, and they do their thing and we do ours. And we have our strengths. They also have their strengths. And I think, we have a very unique advantage in a way, because if we look at the Latin American countries, as I said, we have a really big diaspora, and the cultural connect is extremely strong. And the admiration for India's culture, tradition, and all that is extremely visible, right now in a lot of manifestations that they do. Like for example, the festival that they have in Brazil. I'm forgetting the name of that festival.
The carnival.
Yeah, the carnival. Sorry. Yeah, the carnival. The carnival that they have. They also have a Bollywood and some Indian form of dances as well in those carnivals. So I think we have our real strength in that sense, and that connection. I think not even a big competition will just sweep it away. So we have to use our strengths, and I think we are there for the long haul.
That's right.
Thank you. Air Marshal, any other question? If not, we can
ask anyone else. Okay.
Yeah. So with that, we'll come to the close. So I invite my colleague to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Good evening, all. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this wonderful event. We thank Ms. Gloria Gangte, the Joint Secretary for the LAC countries, for accepting our invitation despite her really busy schedule, and for providing us with valuable insights on India and LAC relations and future potentials. So we young researchers were really excited for this event. And so I thank you especially for answering all our questions in great detail. Thanks to the Air Marshal M. Matheswaran, founder and chairman of Peninsula Foundation, for chairing the event, and to Dr. Sunod Jacob, our senior fellow, for moderating the event. I also thank all the other researchers for their questions, and I'm sure all of us have benefited immensely. Once again, thank you, Joint Secretary. I really hope we get to interact with you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So.
Bye.